I'm a payday guy at heart, but right now I think we've all got to make a little room for Helldivers 2 in our lives. This game has been an absolute phenomenon over the past few weeks, coming as a sequel to the lesser known but still brilliantly well received shoot 'em up Helldivers 1. It probably launched with moderate expectations of success. A similar cult following to its predecessor with a more profitable live service model, a few years of development, a couple 100,000 lifetime sales, and then move on. Yet, at the rate Helldivers is going, already into the millions of units sold with immense mimetic potential, and alongside a genuinely invested, communicative dev team, the future looks incredibly bright. All of this coming after the sort of rocky technical launch that sinks lesser always online games, and in a market that's slowly turning against live services. Helldivers is defying all expectations, and to be frank, it's making a mockery of the games that have gone before it. With all the might of the Suicide Squad IP, or hell as much as it hurts to admit it, the Payday IP, they simply can't light a candle to what Helldivers 2 has already achieved, and likely will go on to do. This game is an enigma, so in today's video I'm going to do my best to break down what makes it captivate new players instantly, why it's just better than its competition at the moment, and to some degree what my own beloved franchise can do to emulate its preposterous success. Possibly the hardest challenge Helldivers 2 faced upon launch was actually getting the servers to function. Once word spread of the game's unique and hilarious gameplay, it wasn't long before they were flooded, and operating an always online model meant, just like Payday 3 before it, the servers struggled to keep up. Outages and lengthy queue times ensued, and I still see the odd comment trying to clear up if these problems have been fixed. But as a slightly later adopter who's already been stung recently by server nightmares, I held off on my purchase until about a fortnight ago, and as a result have never ran into any problems with the game, not even a short queue. This is as a result of Arrowhead's swift, decisive and transparent approach. They anticipated the game's popularity, quickly increased server capacity up to a massive 700,000 concurrent players, and continued to patch the game actively to support these sweeping technical changes. I'm not blind to the fact that this has been facilitated by a close working relationship with PlayStation and Sony, allowing these patches to go through with limited oversight and certification, which we all know slowed down Payday 3's updating process back in October. But it's also fairly indicative of the passion and dedication the team has for their game, ensuring it's in a playable state, whilst the prospective player base are still thirsty to try it out. The game has escaped its technical shackles relatively unscathed, just look at the Steam reviews, and it's now free to develop and iterate on that positive platform without the stench of initial failure following it. Looking at it now, launch really was handled in an exemplary fashion, which is indicative of strong and confident leadership, which just seems lacking in these more cumbersome development teams with massive publisher oversight and dozens of conflicted stakeholders to look out for. Johan Pilestedt has been incredibly impressive on that front as CEO and spokesperson for his team. Outside of just the technical limitations that they had to overcome when operating a massive always online server-driven experience, Helldivers have also had to dodge the many PR bullets that come from the game's live service model. It's quickly become a taboo label in this industry that reeks of unfinished cash grab Hail Mary releases trying to capitalise upon FOMO, franchise loyalty and whale behaviour. It's fair to say live service model fatigue is running rampant, and these titles are now facing far greater critical scrutiny than they were before. I see that people are baying for live service blood half of the time, which makes Helldivers already being an internet darling even harder to believe. How then has this happened? Well, the developer transparency and frequent updates don't half help. The game feels alive, looked after, and appears to be moving in a positive direction. It's also fair to say that it feels like a finished product with hundreds of hours of content despite its more AA price point. These positives are all obviously tempered by developer Arrowpoint's decision to include microtransaction bundles and what amounts to battle passes, and I think with hindsight they might have actually chosen to monetize the game differently after seeing the sheer number of copies they'd sell. But even without that foresight, this is probably the most progressively ran MTX system I've ever seen. In the vast majority of situations, paying extra will not grant you an unfair advantage. Items that you want to purchase are reasonably priced, and you can earn copious amounts of the premium currency just by playing normally. It gives you more reason to explore and left me completely untempted to spend any more on the game, which is just such an anomaly compared to the FOMO-fueled storefronts we're used to seeing. I do have somewhat of an issue with the overcomplication of currency types, which is an issue shared by many games in this co-op live service genre, but as you grasp the availability and purpose of every resource, it stops being a problem altogether. Moving on to the actual gameplay, this is really how Helldivers have already won over an incredibly loyal community. I found the game's onboarding and new player experience to be fantastic. A simple tutorial to make you more aware of basic controls and the overarching mechanics you'll be dealing with, then immediate trial by fire. It's narratively consistent in that throwing inexperienced level 1 players into this hell is completely on brand, so those initial lives full of death by trial and error or friendly fire are immersive enough to keep you playing, whilst also being incredibly memorable as you learn how the many dangers around you react to your presence on the planet. Even when you don't really know what you're doing, you'll undoubtedly still be contributing to your team, as the language of shooting bugs or robots is pretty much universal, and with its co-op focus, the game gives you time to learn through your successes and failures, whilst also watching how your fellow Helldivers deal with situations. I believe this game is absolutely best enjoyed by heading into it with little to zero prior knowledge of optimal strategy, or even what dangers you might end up encountering. It'll make those moments where you come across something new or discover an interaction so much more satisfying. I actually have a bold opinion on this, as I think that Helldivers might be the kind of game that gets marginally worse as you get better at it. Part of its charm and allure is the wonder of not knowing how to fight back against these endless forces, so when you start to boil things down to railgun only optimality, you can start to lose sight of what makes the game so special as a brand new player. I personally hope that Arrowhead throws some curveballs the way of the community in coming patches to keep everyone on their toes, as uncertainty and experimentation is what drives a large portion of the game's replayability. Another massive factor in replayability though is of course difficulty and scaling. I'm inclined to suggest the game probably does have too many difficulties and could benefit from combining a few into one, as it gets a little tricky even telling some apart. But the overall challenge scaling of Helldivers is pretty much spot on in my opinion. It does feel like the hardest difficulties are somewhat gatekept by requiring access to the likes of the orbital laser and railgun, but other than in those specific situations, it's game knowledge, mechanical skill and team play that drives you towards those tougher completions. I imagine a fully decked out squad of beginners would be hard pressed to outperform a squad of veterans with little more than their starting loadout, which is exactly how it should be. Another area that Helldivers has nailed, possibly better than any other multiplayer experience I've played in recent years, is presenting a sense of scale and collective purpose to each player's actions. Monster Hunter World tried something like this with its siege mechanic, but Helldivers opens it up to an almost global scale of cooperation, which you could really feel when you landed at the front of the war for Malevolent Creek, one of the most contested and storied zones of this conflict. There's a selflessness to how the game is approached by the majority of its community members, which is something that needs to be studied when altruism is so rare on almost every other online game I've played. This means that the macro narrative really writes itself, with the community doing so much of the heavy lifting just by being invested in the game, and then the individual micro narratives you write for each Helldiver on a mission weaves itself into this rich tapestry of player lore that leaves you desperate to share your experiences with other players online. It's genuinely ingenious, leveraging the information era to drum up such buzz around the title. Helldivers really just markets itself. These narratives are carried by the game's persistent and ever-changing world that you always feel a part of due to the attention to detail made around pivotal menus on the hub base. How you enter a mission feels immersive and planned out. How you choose to develop your arsenal and ship feels like an involved decision, and as you fly around the solar system from campaign to campaign, there is a genuine togetherness in looking out at the planet below and seeing the effects of a conflict that you're all a part of. Menu and UI design is so important, and the military shooter genre has really sold us a lie with its generic, simplistic and easy to monetize menus. Helldivers is a game with real flair in its presentation, and I don't think I can underemphasize the importance this has on the overall experience. It creates a permanent proximity to the core gameplay and themes of the game that simply can't be replicated by clicking through uninspired menu panels. If you're a Payday fan, just imagine for a minute being able to freely roam around a safe house with your crewmates pre-heist, glancing through your wardrobe or armory to put together the perfect loadout for your next score before heading over to a table filled with heist blueprints or a CrimeNet screen to plan it all out on. The difference it would make to the user experience is hard to even quantify, and I think many games could learn from how impeccably Helldivers has handled this. Despite how well designed the hub world is, Helldivers' gameplay loop is designed in such a way that it makes you want to stay on a mission and simply enjoy the world and silliness you can get up to on it for as long as possible. When you do fight towards the exfil, that's like a different game in itself that's typified by an intense final stand, culminating in a return to the calm of the ship, giving you time to celebrate, take stock, and potentially upgrade your arsenal. As much as I don't want to make this all about Payday 3's failings, that game on the other hand is emblematic of a persistent desire to move through the gameplay sections of its missions as quickly as possible. Attrition makes you want to escape back to the menus as soon as you load in. It's simply the optimal way to play and as such distracts you from actually enjoying the intended experience. With Payday, it's all about the ends, not the means, so you quickly become disassociated with the game as it develops into more of a chore than an enjoyable experience. This drives the meta towards focusing on speedrunning and optimization, which gives the well-crafted elements of the game few moments to shine. Helldivers gives its outstanding mechanics the space to breathe and develop, and the only times you feel rushed are intended, and pair with an adrenaline spike that make it all feel worthwhile. The funny thing is, by all logic, this should be the other way around. One game has a mission countdown timer and a fixed number of lives, the other doesn't. Yet Helldivers, whilst fundamentally restricting mission lengths, feels somehow more open and free, whilst Payday 3 feels like a linear, self-imposed march back to those dreadful menus. I think another area that has exemplified how addictively replayable this game is in how each mission feels so unique. The objectives might often be the same, yet every bot fortress you take on and every bug breach that occurs feels new and unscripted. The planet you land on will require different strategies depending on the environment or layout, and exploration is actively encouraged and heavily rewarded by hiding powerful weapons, extra ammo, or even premium currency within the world itself, thematically consistent in the form of the debris from prior Helldives. There's virtually no forced linearity in how you play through the game's objectives. You can split up, push together as a unit of 4, or head out on a solo mission to secure the entire crew additional loot. In other words, no two squads are playing the game in the exact same way, and as a result, each mission avoids falling into the trap of becoming repetitive. At times, the game feels like a silly sandbox with exaggerated physics, so no matter what it is you're targeting, in the moment, there's always something captivating going on. After several pages of script, something I still haven't really touched on is the core gameplay loop, which, boiled down to its simplest components, revolves around roaming a sizable open world, shooting bugs or bots, and completing simple tasks. But its polish in executing these mechanics and incredible variation in how you can achieve victory makes it so much more than the sum of its parts. Gunplay is brilliant. There are some slight balancing issues. I'd say it's pretty clear which weapons are rising to the top of people's tier lists, but across the board the weapons all feel good to shoot. The drop-in, drop-out first-person fire mode is an excellent option for this game, especially when wielding precision weaponry, and I think what Arrowhead has really done most effectively is they've made some of the most satisfying to shoot enemy types in gaming, bugs and bots with gangly limbs that are just asking to be amputated. It's very clever and really ties together the gunplay. Movement in the game is also excellent. The dive to pro mechanic and ragdoll effects were a match made in heaven, and with so many explosions going around the battlefield, you're bound to capture at least a few moments of perfection every play session. A probably underrated mechanical design decision is the stratagem call-in system. Stratagems are the most powerful tools in your arsenal, allowing you to drop down anything ranging from support weapons to high explosive artillery, but the method by which you call them in is fairly unique. You have to enter an open menu and type in a specific directional input sequence fixed for each individual stratagem. Let me tell you, as a new player, this will cause manic chaos as you try and call an airstrike to save yourself whilst dying in the process. But as you get more experienced and especially comfortable with certain stratagems, muscle memory will start to kick in and you'll become a finger DDR expert, enabling you to call in support without missing a beat. It's a fun skill expression thing, but also a fantastic way to create another element of panic by locking your key abilities behind what amounts to an interactive minigame. I love it. Whilst touching on the stratagems, it's probably also worth mentioning loadouts and builds. Helldivers is not an RPG in the sense that it has skill builds for you to create, but there are still dozens of distinct playstyles that you can tweak depending on the requirements of the mission or your own personal preferences. With there being 2 enemy factions in the game at the moment, different weapons and damage types do better against specific enemies. For example, fire damage is exceptionally strong against bugs, whilst bots seem to resist it, and things like energy shields work specifically against the ballistic weaponry of the bots, but feel slightly wasted up against melee-focused bugs. You'll need to consider your options and what you're facing down before you lock in a build, but from there the variety is still tremendous. You can run a defense-orientated stratagem set with sentry guns and mines, or a pure explosive build looking to focus on death from above, or even just aim to bolster your own Helldivers output by running powerful support weapons and drones. Most things are viable, and just about all of them are fun. Armor passives then augment that playstyle additionally, and I can see the devs looking to evolve this system even further in the future. The thing is, I can try to analyse what makes Helldivers so enjoyable to play as logically as possible, but I still don't think I'll ever quite hit the nail on the head with it. You see, there's an intangible when it comes to what makes this game special, and that is the value of explosions in video games and the innate cinematic quality they offer. A single hellbomb, orbital laser, or rail cannon can turn a video game scenario into a Christopher Nolan directorial masterpiece. It's really hard to find the words or put your finger on exactly what it is that makes these moments so special, but the combination of sensational sound design, excellent visuals considering the archaic engine the game is using, and the context that usually goes along with each blast might go some way to explaining it. As I've already alluded to, Helldivers is a story-swapping game. It presents you with these moments that you simply have to clip and share with friends, which has done the game wonders in terms of social media marketing. Its moment-to-moment gameplay is pretty much second to none for the time being, and that is a huge part of what makes it so enjoyable. Where I will concede that Helldivers can struggle is in single player. To be frank, the game just isn't developed with it in mind, but it's done everything in its power to make the intended multiplayer way to play as accessible and enjoyable as possible. Fortunately, at least in my experience, it also has the community to facilitate this, as I've found toxicity to be virtually non-existent and communication to be surprisingly common. The game's themes of self-sacrifice and brotherhood, however ridiculous and overblown at times, have seemed to result in a more self-sacrificing and understanding community. The cliche of the "go on without me, I'll hold them off" moment is kinda brilliant when you're working around the framework of these expendable troops, meaning you get to have those moments straight out of the movies without failing the mission for everyone else. I think this is what's led to a community that's developed a great sense of humour, is innately cooperative and just fun to be around. It also helps that matchmaking seems to be excellent now the servers function, and it's also incredibly easy to join mid-dive without being a burden on the players already in the mission. Co-op, whilst almost necessary for full enjoyment, is quite seamless and so should never dissuade you from trying the game out, even if you don't have a specific group of friends to play with. In the end though, Helldivers really is the perfect blend of very impressive, clean and focused game design. It gets the simple things right from a quality of life perspective, which strangely seems to be getting harder and harder for games in this industry to manage. But this is where it's so evidently a passion project. I personally love the way the game is presented. Its underlying narrative is told in this tongue-in-cheek way that can be thought-provoking at times, but is really all about embracing the ludicrousness of it all. The patriotism, cries of democracy, and fighting to protect our way of life really only go surface level deep when you remember a Helldiver's current life expectancy is about 5 minutes, if that, especially when I'm piloting them. This could all be a political resource war, in fact it probably is, but the aimlessness of the cause, yet staunch willingness and enthusiasm to fight in it, is kinda what video games are all about, and I personally love the satirical approach. Are we the baddies? Maybe, and that's also fine and pretty amusing. I have to admit, the game is quite buggy, especially when it comes down to the map geometry and getting stuck in it, but this has only ever been a source of amusement for my squad and I, and given how disposable single Helldivers are, it's never been mission ruining. The game just has so much going for it that these tiny blemishes hardly register in your mind. I've not even had the time to discuss the excellent score, the crescendos with perfect timing, or the great voice work of the Helldivers who get enthusiastic about their jobs at just the right moments. With a team of roughly 100 devs, Helldivers being as good as it is really beggars belief, and by all accounts, there's even more to come. From a Payday fan perspective, Helldivers' brilliance has been tough to take. Its success shows the obvious appetite there was out there for a co-op game of this caliber, and so Payday 3's failings sting all the more. There is a lot to be learned, not just by the devs at Starbreeze, but by all live service developers. These games can launch feature complete, they can be monetized sensibly, they can be supported diligently, and most importantly, they can nurture a fantastic, positive community. I've struggled to get this script finished because I've just been so heavily glued to this game. Helldivers 2 is a bit special, and I hope the interest is there from my community to make a few more videos on this one, potentially even some challenge runs, we'll see. So, do let me know if you enjoyed this video, stay tuned on the channel, and please give Helldivers a go if you haven't already.
You had 1 H. Oh, you're hanging!
You're hanging from the ship! You're hanging from the ship!
I got that.
A huge thank you to my dedicated Patreon backers. If you want to join this crew in going infamous, check out the link below and pledge as little as $2 to see your name in the credits, or get 24-hour early access to future videos and vote on upcoming content. Take care, I'll see you all soon.